Hello. Happy Sunday, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Q&A with the cast and director, or some of the cast and the director of Rosmersholm. I'm going to have to keep letting folks into the waiting room as they appear, so bear with me. But I thought we would start off with some introductions. I'll go first. My name is Caroline Retzel. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Constituent Relations Officer in the School of Drama, which means I get to do fun engagement events like this with our students and community members. And yeah, I think that's all I'm going to say. So I will pass it next to Andrew.
Hi, I'm Andrew Coopman. I use they, he pronouns, and I am the director, adapter, and lead designer of this virtual production of Rosmersholm. And I'm a third year MFA in directing candidate. This was my thesis project, so I am done. And I will pass it over to Antonio.
Hi, I am Antonio Mitchell. I am a second year MFA acting candidate, and I played John Rosmer. Pronouns are he, him, but you can see. And that's about it for me. I'm gonna pass it on over to Gretchen.
Hi, my name is Gretchen Hahn. I use she, her, and I'm a second year MFA actor here at the UW PATP, and I played Rebecca West. And that means, last but not least, is Diana.
I'm Diana Trotter. I use she, her. I am an actor in Seattle, and I don't go to UW, but I played Madam Helseth.
Great. Welcome in, welcome guests. You're welcome to keep your cameras off. You're also welcome to turn them on. We're very casual in these sessions. If you have questions as they come up, feel free to put them in the chat. You're also welcome to unmute yourself at any point, but I have some questions to get us started. Hi, Joanne. Okay, so jumping right into it, Andrew, I'm going to direct this play towards you, but I wonder if members of the cast might have some thoughts to share as well. The classic question is, why this play now?
Yeah, I mean, that's the cornerstone of our work, right? As artists, is why do we make the thing?
Start big.
Yeah, why do we make the thing? Why this play? Why now? For me, this play is about this political battle of my side versus your side. And it's about this idea that you must be on my side or you're my enemy, or you must be on this side because you're my friend. And how that political battle is so polarizing. And yet a lot of people, a lot of individuals and some are really interested in that middle ground of like where Rosmer says, I'm really interested in uniting people. And so we watch the events of this play unravel, these characters fighting to win. And I think this play tells the story of a system that just repeats itself, right? It's one of the things that I talked with Val about when I chose this play. This was written in 1886 by an old dead white guy. And yet the conversation in this piece is a conversation we keep having over and over and over and over again throughout history of like, what does it mean to have true equity and equality? How do we bring that about in a system that seems polarized and set against letting it work? Like I said in my director note, it feels like a game of tug of war. And a game of tug of war, someone's always going to win and someone's always going to lose unless you break the rope.
Right.
And something new has to happen. So I chose this play because it is a conversation we keep having to have. And I want us to start having different conversations about how we can actually achieve the goals we set out to achieve. And yeah, I definitely want to bring the cast in. It was a collaborative process. I brought my vision to the table, but they all were huge collaborators and bringers of life and thought to this piece. So yeah, I'll just pass it off to the cast for other thoughts on why this play, why now. That was for me what I chose in pitching this thesis.
Well, I'll say that I think that what you've said is just pretty accurate. Everything just kind of feels like it's either black or white these days. and no one really wants to explore some of what that gray area is that is necessary for us to actually make some sort of actual progress, as opposed to the same continuous loop that we are on. So yeah, I just completely agree on that point. It just kind of feels like a carousel that we need to get off of.
I think too, like when I think about the idea of like now, when that happened, I actually think like this moment now as like the tail end of a lot of things that came about in 2016 with the election in particular, because it felt like that was one of the most like vivid examples that I can remember, like as a fairly young person too, in terms of looking at, you know, the last couple of elections and things that we had of like a truly like polarizing decision that continued to reverberate for so long and is still reverberating even with a different outcome in the most recent one that has happened. But because those reverberations have happened and there hasn't been any change in what that conversation of now is, it feels like it's still going. It's constantly in conversation too, which was a big thing I thought about in this process. So.
Which it's funny because I actually, when I originally pitched the show, I pitched it to open the weekend before the 2020 election.
I remember that. Yeah, that was
That
very
was the
important
original
to you.
intent. Right.
And then the world changed.
And then the world changed again. And then the world changed
Yeah.
again. And then the world changed again and again and again. Right. And it's just amazing to see how this piece has gotten more timely as time went on, right? Like when it became abundantly clear that we were not going to do an in-person production in the fall, a virtual production, that shifted the intent. Then it got pushed later, and I was like, oh man, I really wanted it to happen during the election. And then the election happened, and we were all like, it's still important. Like this is still happening. Oh, we're having real conversations about like fake news, like hard facts being debated, which I mean, like that's another cool aspect about Rosmersholm is that you have a really clear conflict of interest with these two people who own newspapers and using them to their own political gains, and not only using it to get their name out there, but to turn the tide in their direction willfully and doing it knowingly. Again, getting more and more timely, and then the show got more timely as we pushed back further and further and further. And at some point, we were just like, we got to do this piece, and then we're going to do it again because it's going to change again.
I have a sort of a follow-up question, I think. You mentioned that this play was written, I believe, in 1885, published in 1886. So this is the classic play in our season this year. This is Ibsen. That comes with a lot of just everything, a lot of baggage, you could say. So how do you, and this is a question for everyone, how do you tackle a play written in 1886? I think you've talked about how you see its immediate relevance today, but just logistically, how do you tackle folks who speak differently? How do you talk about, you know, choosing an adaptation or adapting this script?
I remember, as someone who was on the season selection committee the first time that this show had been put through by Andrew, it was a completely different adaptation of it with a very modern, well-known playwright adapting it. And it was a really, really excellent adaptation. And then obviously with COVID, we're like, there are new rules to how everything can happen. And so then a couple of iterations, I believe, of the script went through that Andrew played with. And then ultimately he decided he was going to adapt it himself, which was super freeing in that like we were able to cut down some of the, I don't want to call anything in Ibsen frivolous, but there is a lot of really hitting a point multiple times to ensure that it's being heard, which I think is a nature of the art form pre how we feel about it now, like really making sure it's being understood in a way. And Andrew was able to steer this ship so clearly in terms of condensing that down and having such an understanding of the language and how to change it in a way that was going to both help us as actors in terms of our own visual and imaginary work that we were doing, but also help with clarity for audience. And as we were going, Antonio, I'm sure can speak to this, like it's already difficult to learn language like Ibsen, who is such like a word crafter. It is so much harder on Zoom in particular, where you're not even like using these words to land on another person, or they're not landing on you. And so Antonio and I really struggled in some ways. And again, Andrew was very much like, how can we fix this so that the intent of the line is still there and the integrity of the line is still there, but we can make it clearer for you as an actor, clearer for an audience as well. And so kind of having that open discussion all of the time of the ways in which we can not only help ourselves, but also help our future audience to understand it and stay with us on this very long journey, as Ibsen tends to give us. It was really collaborative and helpful in that way, to be able to really look at the language and pick and choose how it was going to continue forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just piggyback off that. It was hard. Yeah, just because this language it's a lot. And so, yeah, having it be a collaborative process and it continuing to be a living and breathing thing as we worked on it was so, so important. Just because we were dealing with a lot, constantly we were dealing with things that we normally would not be dealing with when working on a show. So, and we had to address it. There was no, we couldn't just try to treat this as a normal process. We had to address the multiple elephants in the room as they, made themselves very present. So yeah, I think that is something that I hope we kind of continue to take forward, is being willing to like go after things and really talk about things when something's just ultimately not working. Because I think sometimes in live theater, we can just kind of like gloss over things and kind of just keep it moving and, figure it out. But being such a collaborative space helped so much. And, if it wasn't the space that it was, I don't think things would have went the way that they did.
Yeah, in adapting it, I knew that it was an ungodly ask to ask any audience member to sit in front of a Zoom screen for 3.5 hours. It was like the nuts and bolts of it. And so then the question became like working in the space about how we can distill this narrative while maintaining Ibsen's beautiful poetry and theatricality and drive to the event of the second act, right? It's a journey. It feels like, for me, the way I thought about it was that it felt like the show was like a horse galloping towards the end. Like it gets faster and faster and faster, and then it like you can't turn away. And so trying to adapt it, I adapted one version that was supposed to be for the in-person version, where the ending actually was very different. And Diana, I talked to Diana, right, I talked with you about how it was originally going to end. And then that opportunity didn't become possible on the Zoom.
Do you mind sharing with us what you were thinking?
I'm hoping to get it produced somewhere in Seattle soon. So I'm going to hold on to that little nugget of wisdom for my future adaptation.
I had to
I have the script. It's ready. Like, let's go. But the intention behind the adaptation was still present in this version, in that it is about the humans trying to find what's next and trying to build the world they hope to see at all costs, and that sometimes those costs are too dire and too dangerous and too much. So yeah.
Diana, did you want to take a stab at this question, or should I move on to the next one?
I think one of the really challenging things about Ibsen, and particularly a play like this, in terms of what it would have meant in 1885 and how it resonates today, is like, I think it's very challenging for a contemporary audience to understand the necessity of the final act that Rosmer and Rebecca take. Because in our world, it's like, what? Just, what? In his world, the pressure, the constraints of those social norms were so overpowering that it leaves them nowhere to go to get out of them except to jump. And I think that's the piece that's hardest to transition to a contemporary setting, because we just don't feel that in our maybe contemporary American world. Maybe in other cultures that would still be the case, where the only way out is to just basically remove yourself. And so I think it's I look forward to a time when Andrew can try out his idea of how he would like it to end, to see how that, to see if that that changes that resonance. So I think that's difficult. I think it's difficult in the ending of so many Ibsen plays when, Nora walks out the door and we all go, yay, emancipated woman, but there's nowhere for her to go.
No.
She's walking out the door to, probably starvation and poverty. There's nothing out there for her, but it's very hard for us to understand that. Or Hedda shooting herself, or the wild duck girl. I mean, it's every ending. He's constantly pushing down on the people so hard that they don't have any, that's the constant cry in his plays. And I think that's still true in our world, which is what makes it timely, but it also makes it really challenging, because we're always like, why did it have to end that way? That it didn't have to end that way. When in his world, it does have to end that way.
Yeah, because it's the individual against society.
Yeah.
Right. And once the individual becomes aware of their function within the society, they can't live in it anymore.
Right.
They can't survive it anymore. And then they actually become a problem for it.
Yes. Particularly if they're female.
Exactly.
Right.
Because of all the reasons. Like there's no upward mobility.
Yeah.
Rebecca is one of the most free and liberated women of Ibsen's work, I would argue. Because she has her independence, she is educated, she has freedom to an extent to make choices about her occupation and livelihood, and yet she is still under the pressure of Rosmersholm, that name, that the expectation, the community, the ancestors of Rosmersholm look down and they have to extinguish her.
I was having a discussion with someone and kind of talking about how like Shakespeare's MO is very much like, I'm going to like set up a story and then I'm going to put as many extreme out of this world circumstances on top of these people as possible. And then I'm just going to watch what happens and see how they're able to adjust. And it really did get me thinking, where I'm like, Ibsen is very much the same way, in particular in the way that he puts things onto women, I would say, or people who are going against the norm of the otherwise set up world. And there's something about the circumstance where it's like, like ghost story aside in here, like when I compare it to Shakespeare is so magical in so many ways. And this is so many situations being thrown on top of people that are really we can understand those things being thrown onto them, and then have to watch the way in which they're able to react and recover. That somehow makes it feel closer, I think, and it can reach an audience in a different way. Of course, still noting what Diana said, and like some of the decisions that are made might be harder for us to relate to as a modern audience. But I think the circumstances we see thrown on these characters are closer in a way, and that kind of lends to how scary the stories can get.
And I should add that like my adaptation idea for my future production still includes John and Rebecca's end, because I think that action is necessary and must be honored when it comes to Ibsen's work. But as a director and an artist, I'm really interested in the what's next question. Like what happens next? Like what happens now? And that's where the I'll say the slight twist adaptation of the ending really speaks to this question I'm interested in, because, and Diana, as you were talking about like this idea that a contemporary audience doesn't connect with the idea of ending the life. I almost think we've gone also to an opposite extreme, right? We have a lot of people in our culture currently being like, burn everything down, like burn it all down, burn it all down, burn it all down. And is that a solution? And I wonder what'll happen, another 100 years down the road when people look at us and they're like, did you really mean that? What does it mean to break? And so that's where my adaptation comes into play, is the question of what's next. Because I think that's what we as theaters and artists do, is we hold the mirror up to society and ask the question, okay, now what?
Great answers. Thanks. I'm going to ask, Antonio started to touch on this actually already about bringing the super collaborative spirit that you all had in the room for creating this production. But what do you miss most about in-person theater? And what's one or more things from virtual theater you will miss or would like to keep when we return to in-person?
I'm going to jump in on that. I was talking to Gretchen last night when we were running over some lines, and I wanted to speak to this because so many of them in this production know each other because they're students at UW, but I only knew Andrew. And I was saying to Gretchen, we just did a show. We just spent 6 weeks in rehearsal, and then, the dress rehearsals and all that stuff. And there was but I might recognize them if I passed them on the sidewalk, but I didn't get to know them. There was none of the
small talk,
the dressing talk, especially once a show opens, when you're hanging out in the dressing room with your co-actors and you really get to know each other. And although Gretchen was on stage most of the time, so we might not have gotten to talk much anyway, but just all that, like, well, who are you and how did you get involved in theater and what is it you want to be doing? And the friendships and the tribe that I feel like I have of theater colleagues around all the places I've worked, I didn't get that in this show. And that felt, so
yeah.
That I miss that. So there's so many things I miss, but I think that is the piece, the relational piece of being in the room. And then of course, as Gretchen was saying, the way that it was very odd to be like trying to live in an imaginative world when I'm in my condo. And the camera, I can barely see the face of the actor on the screen across the room from me. And I feel like I'm talking to myself, but I'm trying to convey this. So that thing that Gretchen was talking about lines landing on, it's why we want to go live. It's why I like to be in the audience live, because you can see that and feel that kinesthetic connection. So I really, really miss that. I do think there's lots of fun. One of the things I'll really miss, and I hope this doesn't go away, is getting to see even Zoom readings of productions from all over the world. Like, I love that. Getting to see, I'm subscribed to a thing coming out of New York right now where it's just, well-known actors just getting together and basically doing a rehearsed reading of a play. And it's just like, oh, this is so great. I don't have to fly to New York to see them, although I really miss and can't wait to fly to New York and see some stuff. But so I hope that we continue to make stuff available virtually, but it will never replace being in the audience. Not for me.
I think the accessibility of virtual theater is really amazing. And that people who, for the huge variety of reasons, can't attend live theater for X, Y, and Z reasons, now have more access to do so. For the socioeconomic aspect, these tickets have been relatively more affordable, and you don't have to go to New York to see Hamilton. You don't have to go to anywhere. You could be in your home and watch it, and even put it on pause if it gets overwhelming. for our neurodiverse community and for any communities that are triggered or working to watch a production because they want to, but it's very exhausting for them physically or social anxiety. The virtual theater makes it accessible, but I definitely so that is one part I want to take with me is how can we actually expand the accessibility to more people and more communities to see live theater. I will 100% agree with Diana that I want to be back in the freaking room. I just want to be in 3 dimensions. I want to be able to like literally grab a chair and move it and be like, let's try it over there.
Yeah.
I miss I mean, and this is like kind of theater. Like I hear people say like this is theater. I'm like it's not. It's somewhere between.
I agree with
It's
you,
like
Andrew. Yeah.
it's not theater, but it's not theater, but it's definitely not cinema, and it's definitely not film. Like
Right.
it's something in between that aesthetically, like does it excite me to do interdisciplinary productions where there's a virtual component in live space? That sounds really fucking cool. But like I'm quickly reaching the end of my virtual theater like interest. um and yet what an exciting opportunity to collaborate with artists across the world. Like in this pandemic, I've been able to produce shows in Chicago that I would have never been able to do during grad school in normal.
Yeah, you've been so busy this year, not just here, not just at your job. Yeah.
And so that I'm thankful, and I'm thankful that like this production brought Diana back into my life. Diana was the first teacher ever to teach me how to direct.
For those that don't know, Diana was Andrew's professor at undergrad at Whitworth University. Is that right? Yeah. Full circle.
And so she sent me on a journey, and now I'm directing her, and it was such a wonderful gift. And I remember the first day being like, Andrew, don't get terrified.
I was going to say, were you nervous? I'd be nervous.
Yes. Why wouldn't I be? Diana had one of the most profound impacts on my life. And yeah, don't blush too much. Just kidding. But I wouldn't be on the journey that I'm on right now without Diana and Val. Those 2 humans helped me become the director I am today. And after the first day, though, I knew what I was doing, and it was so fun to direct Diana because I know Diana trusted me, and I trusted Diana, and it felt really collaborative and super fun. And I mean, I could say that about this whole cast. Working with Antonio was a dream. He always showed up fiercely ready to interrogate the text and find the nugget of wisdom in it. Gretchen is an incredibly dynamic storyteller who shows the fuck up every time. Like she walked on screen and just like was there. And Christopher was always just a joy to have in the room, just fun and bubbly, and he made so much out of one scene. And Matt brought his like vocal talents to the score. He is 37 years old and played a 60-something-year-old man. Like he's incredible and just so fun. And like that's another person I've known for like since 2013. I met him in Nolens, and like it was just it's and then Gabriel, a first year that I actually never met in person before starting rehearsals for this show. And then yes, we've had some hybrid this quarter, but each person in this cast brought all of their authentic selves to this production. And that's a piece that I mean, like we all got scrappy. We all did the thing. So that scrappiness, that storytelling, I take that with me post virtual theater. I'm just kind of ready to leave the computer behind.
I'm just going to pop in really quick and say, guests in the room, if you want to put questions in the chat or unmute yourselves to ask questions, just give us a shout. Otherwise, I have more questions and we'll keep going.
What do you miss?
Sorry?
Oh, I was gonna say Antonio had made a face before you started talking, Caroline. And I was like, I want to know what Antonio misses.
Yeah, sorry, didn't mean to cut you 2 off.
Oh no. I mean, both Diana and Andrew have basically hit the nails on the head. It's just I do miss that in-person camaraderie like all the behind the scenes backstage things that happen, and just really getting to know your castmates. Like it's something that I just really, really miss. Like, me, Gretchen, and Gabriel, since we're all in the same building, we get done and we get to kind of like talk and decompress a little bit. But just that feeling, like when you're in rehearsal and you're not working on a scene, just like talking with someone and just getting to know those people, just those tiny little moments, you don't realize how much you enjoy them until you don't have them.
Yeah.
And that is just something that I cannot wait to have back, because even in working on other virtual productions, it's the same thing. You're here, you got to get on, you got to work, you can't go anywhere. If you do go anywhere, it's just somewhere else in your own home. Then at the end of the night, you say bye and that's it. Like, you don't get those interpersonal connections. And so I just really am excited to have that back. But the accessibility is something that I do hope continues forth, because the amount of people that are able to now have access to theater that have not had it before is awesome and wonderful to me. And I hope that, theaters start to implement recording shows more often so that this can happen a lot more. Because it's great. Like, and people should have this accessibility. It shouldn't have taken this long to begin with.
I was gonna say earlier, our ticket office let me know today that we had patrons from Florida and New York call in to buy tickets for today. Florida and New York, that's far corners for Washington here.
I think like something that's so niche specific about what I miss in person, so stick with me. But like, I am one of those people. I think theater spaces are inherently magic. Like there's something about like the seats and the, like, there's something about where like the air feels different in those spaces, and you walk in and you can just feel it, and it's charged, even if it's dark, like if nothing's going on in a theater, but then when there is something going on, it's just palpable. Like there's an energy in that space that I feel like I not only was getting so tired being on the computer all the time, but like you don't have that same energizing of a space. You have to find ways to do it for yourself. And you can. I think there's lots of tools that actors and directors can use to really energize and personalize a space and give yourself stimulus. But there is something about the air that I fully believe is different in a theater, that like, that's the thing that I miss. I miss being able to touch every single seat in the house with like my hand and actually like feel and like, set an intention for the show that's about to come, for these people that are going to be in those seats, that like is not quite the same. We'd walk into our rooms here and like set up our stuff, and we have our imaginative warm-ups and things that we can do and ways that we can problem solve, and make this feel as close to what we know is theater as possible. And yet it's still so different. I have to open my computer and like have these tiny versions of people that then I have to remember are full-size people. And then like the show is over and then you like hit that end button and you close. And like, again, the air is always different at the end of the show, but it is a different, like all the way. Again, very niche, Diana, is what I was at, where I'm like, it's going to be like a really weird, my own actor thing, but like I miss that energy that sit in those spaces inherently among everything else. Being able to like feel the energy coming off of the bodies you're working with and the ones that are watching you. It just like this, it is a different air in those spaces. And like, obviously I miss everything, but that in particular, I'm like, you can feel it. And I don't think you really think about how you feel it until you have the absence of it, which we've had for like 14 months now. And hot take, I don't want to keep anything about Zoom meetings. Like
that's okay.
Nothing at all. I absolutely despise it. I do agree. Accessibility is a huge conversation that we've had. And I'm like, I'm glad it can go there. And I think it has its uses for things like readings, or like, when theaters want to do like events and it's like, oh, we'll bring in a play that a donor suggested we do. I think there is a great camaraderie of that. But I'm like, I would much rather take it that step above, where it is approaching like TV film, where it's like a sound stage and you record it. Like National Theater Live, I think probably they were great through all of this, because they've been doing versions of this in some way that are like so enticing for so long, where they are taking actual stage productions and filming them in a way and putting them out there to make theater accessible, which I do think it needs to be. The way TV and film are so accessible and so affordable too. Like the fact that there once existed a time, maybe still even, I don't even know because Broadway is closed. But like the fact that you could have a subscription to Netflix, Hulu, and like HBO for a year and it would still cost less than a ticket to Hamilton boggles my brain.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
100%. And I'm like, that is, I think, the new mission that I think would hopefully come out of a time period like this. Maybe not so much come out of Zoom theater, but out of the necessity that became Zoom theater, is finding a way in which to make the form, which is inherently different than just regular TV and film, into something that is accessible the same way that TV and film is what I would hope that we would all keep pushing for coming out of it. But I don't know if I would take anything other than that. Like,
yeah, I feel you on that. And actually your discussion about the space, the physical space that y'all are performing in, actually leads me quite well into my next question, which is I want to talk about the design of this show. Also the logistics. Antonio and Gretchen, you were able to perform in separate rooms in Hutchinson Hall. Diana, you're at home. Our other two guest artists were at their homes. Gabriel, our first year MFA student, was also in Hutchinson. Like that's lots of things going on there. But Andrew, maybe this question should start off with you. As you said at the beginning, you were lead designer. I believe Andy Smith came in as a lighting designer to kind of assist in tech. But there was, my response when I watched the show on Thursday was, wow, this is great that this is the last show in our season this year, because I think design-wise, it's the most fully realized Zoom production we've seen this year. Like it was, the lighting is so incredibly beautiful. How you were able to set up these rooms and make the use of the architecture in Hutchinson Hall was so intriguing and fun. The visual interest I had watching this show of the background beyond our wonderful actors was way different than anything else I've experienced this year. So that's my reaction. Take it away, Andrew.
Great. It means the world to hear you say that. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Because it was as the processes work towards like what is this show going to be, it just the way the cards fell, it was whatever design elements are going to be in Rosmersholm, Andrew's going to have to figure out. And I mentioned this, I think, in an Instagram post about how like it at first felt hella lonely. I'm not going to lie. It felt super lonely and super terrifying. Except everything in this program has led me to believe that I am capable of experimenting and figuring it out. And so this was also a great culmination to my time at UW. In approaching the design of this, I've directed, Rosmersholm makes the 8th production I've directed online. Using a variety of different techniques and designs and trying to figure out what is the best way to tell a story on Zoom theater, even though I'm really done with Zoom theater, but like, what is the best way to tell it on Zoom theater? And for me, it was about what elements and how can I use those elements to be distilled and clarify the storytelling. Things that became superfluous or things that became just like super niche quickly fell away because it really worked towards clarity of storytelling. I am very thankful that Andrew Smith, design advisor, and in the end took over the lighting design. He made my idea of using the sunset as part of the design possible, and he helped me actualize that and bring that to life with the lighting panels. And then being able to bounce set ideas off him. Like I did a whole day where I came to Hutchinson Hall and like walked through every corner of every room to be like, well, what could this be? What could this be? What could this be? I mean, like Gabriel performed in a 10-foot long hallway
Right.
in the back corner of one of the rooms. Like that's like, it's not a space anyone uses. And then I walked back there and like, well, maybe, Gretchen's space, it was the first one I decided. Just because it was the most obvious. It was grand.
That room in Hutchinson is magical anyways. So yeah, I could see that choice.
It is the most magical role. It's haunted and it's magical.
Oh, okay.
But so in terms of the costume design, just figuring out how to tell the story effectively, without overpopulating the screen.
Mm.
I think those are all the lessons I took with me, was how do I tell this story the most efficiently, with the most impact, with the lowest amount of resources offered to me. And I am very proud of how it ended up, and I am very thankful for Andrew Smith and also Deb Trout for their advice. I pulled the costumes, showed them to Deb, and Deb was like, "Wow, this is actually kind of brilliant." And I'm like, "Oh, thanks." And I have to give super duper credit to every cast member, because as much as I can design the space, it didn't actually happen without their work. They are the ones who assembled the lighting panels. They are the ones who figured out their costume transitions, their props transitions, their set and camera transitions. And so, yes, I designed it, and I couldn't have done it without this cast.
That's interesting because, yeah, you're stripped of our crew members that we typically would have on an in-person production. So, making sure everything is exactly where it needs to be, and costume changes, which are always sort of in an actor's responsibility list, but not maybe their primary focus, became just a total extra element for all of you performers.
Yeah. And then once we designed all those elements, then it became about designing the OBS screen. OBS was the technology we used to stream the production, which is something I introduced to UW, I think, somehow. And figuring out how to best tell the story there, as a big part of how we tell the story. So using where are the cameras going to go, and what arrangement, and what size, and what is actually behind them, and then watching the background transition. It started out really bright and seafoam greeny, and then it got to this dead dark green as the show went on. So I'm very thankful and for everyone involved, and M. Chan as stage manager and Josh Barajas as assistant director also were really helpful in actualizing those things. They were another set of eyes. I had to transition hats a lot of the show. It's like, which hat am I wearing now? Director hat, costume hat, set hat, and luckily I had a team and a cast I was able to help look from the other hats when I wasn't able to wear that hat the entire day. So that's, design wise, that was the goal, was to distill visually the story to its most essential elements. And I don't know how for you three, bringing it to life with all the elements. How is that on y'all's end?
I mean, rehearsing in 208 for so long, and then finally transitioning into 218 was so nice. There was something about that space that was just so useful. I don't know if it was just the darkness of the room, but there was something about it that was just very, it was a fun space to play in. And yeah, it just kind of helped to bring everything to life. There was definitely a different energy in that room. I always felt like things were watching me. I don't know what it is about that space, just something about that room is just odd. But yeah, it kind of helped in instilling this loomingness of the house and what that means, and this constant pull and closing ace. So that was really lovely. And then just kind of, as we constantly just kept getting things and learning things, I found out early on, I trusted you anyway, but I just always felt comfortable in your hands. I was like, Andrew's got this. He's gonna figure it out. I don't have anything to worry about. Just do my part of my job, and everything else will fall into place. And that's exactly what happened. So.
Okay, well, we're running a little short on time. I think if y'all are happy to keep talking, I'm happy to ask my last two questions, and I'm going to pair them. So one question is, things go wrong. How do you handle that in virtual theater? Follow-up question is, favorite part about working on this show? So answer both those things. How do you handle it when things go wrong in virtual theater? And what is that like?
Well, I don't know what night you saw the show, Caroline, But we had this incredible, like, no problems or anything during tech. Like, it was smooth. Like, the whole 6 weeks had been smooth. And we get to opening, and it's the start of Act 2, which is the second half of Act 1 before intermission. And go, and like, I'm very used, I wore headphones in the show because I had large crosses I had to accomplish across the space to really get a sense of movement and being trapped within a large space, but wanting to get out of it, that Andrew and I discussed and were sort of playing with. And so to do that, I knock very close to my headphones, and I'm knocking a very long time, and Antonio doesn't seem to hear me. So I'm like, not a big deal. This is what I came to grad school for, to be an actor who can deliver, who can change what they're doing. And then I start speaking, just trying to get his attention to be asked into the room. Nothing. Yeah. Absolute nothing. And our poor Connor, who was running OBS when Andrew left, like, came up, and I was like in this scene, and here's Connor being like, we can't hear you. And I was like, I have gathered that, Connor. Thank you for telling me it is in fact true. And so then finding a way to get close, I'm unmuted. Everything should be going okay. And like, sweet Connor, God bless him, honestly, is just trying to like click and switch my mic to anything else. And Antonio is
like so the scene.
Yeah, Antonio is doing a really great job of trying to stall and improv while we figure this out. And then Caroline, as soon as Connor walked out of the room, my whole screen went black. Like, I was completely, not even just like no one could hear me anymore or I froze. Like, my computer decided it couldn't handle the switch that had just happened, out completely. So the way you handle that is, one, by screaming so you don't cry, and then a deep breath, and then you do what any actor would do and you log back in.
Yeah.
And luckily, everyone has gotten really good at covering those sorts of things with like hold slides. We can get back and we can make it, but it does kind of rattle you.
Yeah.
And they were so calm through that whole thing in getting us back. They were like, we promise the dead time actually isn't as long as it feels like it is to you. So their steadfastness in Andrew's absence that day was super helpful. I saw my phone blowing up like across the room, and I knew it was going to be Andrew being like, it's okay, you've got this. Antonio was also a very excellent, like, because Antonio knows me, I'm in an 11 at all times, just about. I'm very up here. And for something like that to happen to him, he actually got me down to what felt like an 8. Like, I felt much calmer. And then we had the whole moment of just like resetting, going, and then doing it again, and we got through it. And it kind of prompted this discussion among us about like liveness and what it can still be. And it was obviously like devastating in that moment, because it's different than like going up on a line in front of a bunch of people. It's something that's so out of your control. I guess the only equivalent would be like if the fire alarm went off in an actual theater or something.
You had to leave.
You have to adjust, but that's still something collectively that the actors and the audience go through together. And this felt so isolating. It felt very like to see your screen go black and then be like, I'm alone in this beautiful kind of haunted room. I think there's a ghost, or like one of them decided to come for the run of the show of some sort. And you're just like, oh God, what do I do? And like, all that you can do is just like go back and then finish it. And it ended up still being a really strong run, despite like feeling like there was a couple of, at least I felt like they were hiccups, because I wasn't fully, just trusting that it was enough. But we had done such great work, thanks to Andrew and like the whole like casting crew and everything, that it was easier to relax back into that trust and be like, the show will go on, we will be okay. Than I think it would have been otherwise. I feel really grateful for the catch-alls that were kind of developed in that, to be able to come back from it. So it's helpful to scream, just honor that emotion that happened when something goes wrong, and then like pick yourself back up and log in. That's the new phrase, I guess, our new Zoom phrase. It's like, just log back in.
Yeah. Being on the opposite side of that, Yeah, I remember I got started and I was just like, oh, all right, I am getting no sound. It's like, I'm just gonna keep going. Because at this point, what was nice about this is I knew no one was in any real danger. So I was like, just keep going. Eventually, either it will fix itself or we'll get a hold. And I was like, so we're just gonna keep working our way through it. So that's just what I was doing. And then next thing you know, Gretchen's gone. And I was just like, all right. I was like, then M caught the hold, and I was like, all right. I was like, there's not really too much we could have done about this, but we're just gonna breathe and we're just gonna reset. We're gonna do it again. Like that's the one joy about this. Like, because sometimes there's those things in theater, technical elements where it's dangerous. Like those are like it's a little bit of a different situation. But like this was different. Like the danger, and no one was gonna get hurt. So I was like able to like breathe and just like keep it going. Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that. That's a really good point. I feel like if you get it when you're live, if you get a hold called, it's usually because something has gone really, really wrong and someone is in danger. So that is actually a nice thing about things going wrong in Zoom theater. It's frustrating. It's maybe more frustrating as an actor because it's way less in your control. But you just, like you said, you reset and move on. And yes, Gretchen, I did watch on Thursday, and that did sort of inspire this question.
Yes.
Yeah.
I felt like there was a giant glass of milk on the horizon, just like about to spill. And like I was in slow-mo and there was nothing I could do to fix. And I was like, it's just going to be a big mess.
Yeah.
I don't even remember what the second question was because I was so like, let me talk about things going wrong.
Yeah.
My second
I'll
question.
Just add,
oh yeah, go ahead.
I'll just add that the liveness question, like I agree, being in that moment and being at home, because as directors, we open the show and then we step away. Like that's our job, is to step away from the thing and let die. And being at home, definitely had the same. When I saw it going, I like got up from my chair. My husband was like, breathe, because we all have director telepathy when we're like, move left, or fix itself. But the next day, in talking to my students in drama 252, multiple of them, and even the UW Daily interviewer that I talked to, expressed that actually in that moment they were reminded of how much they love and miss live theater.
Yeah.
And that was a really nice reminder
in the moment.
Live. And in that moment, as their teacher, I was like, thank you. While on the inside, I'm like, I want to be done with Zoom theater. But it was a nice moment. So I do think when things go wrong, like we as theater makers are trained to not stop, but to find the way out, So that answers that question. What was the second question?
It was just very broad. What was your favorite part about working on this show? What was the good stuff to take us out?
These collaborators. As a director, I believe in creating a really curious space, a really explorative space, a space where I don't know is three of the strongest words you can use, because that means we'll go find it out the answer together. And this project, is something I've been prepping for and working on for almost a year, and it constantly was shifting. And it was the end of my UW career, and I am so thankful that it was this group of humans who, and I said this earlier, but like this process could have felt super lonely. Mm-hmm. Making Zoom theater is a lonely art form, which I think goes back to like why what we miss about live theater is that in the roomness of being able to connect, and it's not just to connect, but it's also to feel a little less lonely in the world. And so this process could have felt super duper lonely. It could have felt super isolating. And yet coming to rehearsal at the end of every day was one of the highlights of the past 6 weeks of my life. Making this piece is actually one of my most proudest achievements in my career so far, because we looked at the circumstances around us and we said, okay, so what? Let's make something anyway. And we did. And I think we made something beautiful. And so, I think that's my favorite part, was the fact that I got to direct my best friends, and a very dear old friend, a former student, my former mentor. And I got to collaborate with former students and a stage manager that I had trained, and a dramaturg who was just auditioned for me one day and then expressed to me their interest in being a dramaturg. And so I was able to give them that opportunity. So every every human attached to the show brought their full authentic selves to the table and were able to make the world feel a lot less isolated. So that's my favorite part.
I mean, I'll just agree with that, like, fully. Like, I don't know how else this process would have went if it wasn't for the group of people that I was working with. Because in having the immense struggles that I had learning the lines for the show, you know, there were times where I was just like, oh my gosh, like, I just feel like I'm wasting people's time. Like, I just, you know, there was just this weird amount of pressure that I had put onto myself. And there wasn't really any way to like pull yourself out of that moment when you're just in this room by yourself. But it was the moments after and the discussions had after rehearsal that kind of helped to fix all this, where, you know, with other teams, you're sometimes, especially in a world like this, you're on your own. Like,
Yeah.
Oh, that sucks. See you tomorrow. But there was just such a great world of communication and acknowledgement of what type of situation we were in that made this less daunting. So yeah, just I couldn't have asked for a better team.
Yeah, I think the team was so great. Like, we somehow were able to find ways to still feel really connected, whether it's Antonio picking up a coffee and leaving it outside of my door, or like we get out after and somebody just happened to drive that day and we're able to, you know, like take someone home. Like those moments of connection and shared struggle and heartache and triumph, like you experience in a rehearsal process, I think was the thing to be able to keep us going. And I think too, like getting to work on a script with such a relevant story, you know, to like take it back to question one, to like work on something that felt like it had such meaning, and to be digging into characters that are so complex and layered in a lot of ways. Like, I don't think Rebecca's a villain, but she's not a protagonist either. And it to be an antagonist and be a complicated like woman in a show is like always a dream come true, to not be playing like the you know, especially in like classical pieces that we see like a much more limited scope of what female characters can do sometimes, and some, you know, and then we get like our anomaly where it's like you get a Viola or you get like an Isabel, like a couple of them where they're just like dealing with so much, and that's really fun. And I think Ibsen is a gift in that way. Like Hedda, I would put Rebecca up there with Hedda and, you know, a lot of his other women that he's written. So for me personally, that was also super exciting to get to work on such a complicated part and stretch the brain a little.
Yeah.
Okay, that does bring up another point. Being able to find the intersection between myself and John was a ton of fun, because I was talking to Val about this last week, but clearly I am Black, and I take that with me everywhere that I go. No matter what role that I step into, that is a thing. So being able to bring everything that comes with that along with this already super complicated world was a lot of fun to navigate, but also very eye-opening. It just made certain parts of the show that much more intense, and the idea of societal pressures and what that was tacked on to who I am, it just all felt very close and near and dear to me. So making sure that I was doing the story justice felt even more important to me than usual. So that was fun.
I just really loved, I mean, I didn't get to have, I was jealous, I was very jealous, because I didn't obviously get to go out for, no one brought coffee to my door. What's up with that?
It's because those cookies are arriving on Monday.
Oh,
Don't
there
worry.
you go. There you go. So, but I did love, it was a long, quiet year. And a lot of days of like, what am I doing? What is my point in life? So it was just so great to have a project and rehearsals every day, even though it was in this weird way of doing it, with a great script and, a small but juicy role to play and wonderful castmates to watch and listen to. And I'm just going to say, cheesy as it may be, to be directed by Andrew. I mean, it's delightful. I was nervous on the first day, right? I was your undergrad professor. I taught your acting class. What if I sucked? What if I was the nightmare actor that I was always telling you guys, try not to be this what if I was that person? And actors, you guys know what I'm talking about, right? We are always longing to work with good directors. We're just longing for it. People where we can bring stuff in and try stuff and they can go, oh, I like that. I don't like that. Go this way, go that way, where you can trust, because we can't see ourselves, that they're going to give us specific and strong and clear feedback about what they want and help us, so that you feel like I'm going to be able to bring the best I can do here because this person's going to help me with that. I can trust them. I don't have to worry that I'm going to do something stupid and they're not going to notice, or they're going to just let it go if it's not as good as it could be. So I had a blast with that, Andrew. So it's hard to speak how much that has meant to me to be in your show and to see, what a good, strong, clear director you have turned into. So that was delightful. Okay, now I'm all really embarrassed. See, I'll just turn the camera away.
I know. I'm like, wait a minute.
Well, I think that is an awesome note to end on. Thank you all so much for spending this portion of your afternoon with us. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I really, really enjoyed this. I'm giving you a round of applause that you missed through this run. Yeah, thank you. Also, guests, for joining us.
Experiences too.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, nothing like bowing to no one, but bowing to people. There were people there, trust me. All right. Well, I think that's it. Thanks again for being here. I'm going to stop recording this now.